Hi, and welcome to week 2 of Public Relations Principles. It's Dr. Jessica Freeman. I hope you're having a great week and that you are progressing well through our readings and our assignments for the course. I want to start today's video with a couple of housekeeping reminders. First of all, I wanted to remind you and let you know that Case Study 1 now has a grade in D2L for you. I finished those here a little while ago today, so those should be graded and you should have a little bit of feedback on those. Overall, you guys did a good job. I basically look at the case studies to see that you fully answered the questions, that you've done some critical thinking, that you've read and responded fully to the case study scenario. But as you can probably tell, the case studies are subjective questions, right? There's no right or wrong answer. And so as long as I see evidence of thinking and responding fully, then that is a grade that you should be able to get in full. So you'll see that those are completed, and I'll talk a little bit about the Reese's case study here in a second. Another reminder is that quiz 1 is due. You have to have completed that by tomorrow, that being Wednesday, June 7th. I saw when I logged into D2L just a little while ago that only a couple of you, I believe about 2 out of the 12 of you, have completed that quiz. So please make sure that you log in and do that, because it is a significant part of your grade, those weekly quizzes, and it is my way of evaluating that you are engaging with the textbook, which, as we talked about in week 1, I consider to be your second instructor, right? Especially in an online course, it's important that you're keeping up with those readings, and that's my way of doing that. If you have any questions, let me know, and keep in mind that the corresponding PowerPoints are also online under content for you. Along with that, keep in mind that quiz 2, I will be posting. It will go up today, and I will be posting that, and that will be due a week from Wednesday, June 7th. So it'll be June 14th, I believe. And then also, along with that, keep in mind that case study 2, which deals with a police department's posting on a couple of people who were photographed in a vehicle after having a meth overdose. That case study is due on Friday, right? So make sure that you are reading that and completing that, and I'll be talking a little bit about that in the next video. That case study was specifically chosen because it does fit with your readings for week 2, dealing with ethics and law, and also with the readings that you guys will look at in week 3 as well, addressing social media and public relations. So all of those concepts kind of fit with the second case study. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is just kind of the readings from the text this week. And overall, these readings largely are an introduction, right, to the practice of public relations. And as you probably have noticed, they largely address fundamental concepts of public relations, such as the history of public relations, that video with Dr. Cecil, where he's talking about the historical roots and key figures in public relations. Really important to understand and know, right, where the discipline does evolve from in order to understand where it's going. And then also we talk a lot about theory, right, in those PowerPoints and in the text. And you might be wondering, especially as an undergraduate, why is theory important to me as someone who wants to maybe go and be a practitioner, who wants to go out in the field? Why do I need to know this? And the thing that I tell my students, and I really believe this, is that if you look at the PowerPoints, good theory serves 2 really key purposes, right? To explain and to predict human behavior, right? And so if we are able to look at our discipline and number one, look at and explain human behavior, and then going forward to be able to predict it, then if we apply those theories as practitioners, right, they help us to understand what's going to happen in the future. It sets us up for more success as public relations practitioners as we are creating campaigns and messaging, right? It helps us to decide what approaches are going to be the most successful in certain situations. So we do study theory because it provides a context for understanding how people are going to react in the future, right? And predict that behavior. So those theories are important. It's also what I like to call really testable material. So you see a lot of that in your quizzes from the week. And so make sure you're paying attention to that as you move through. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the case study this week, the Reese's case study. Overall, like I said, I'm really pleased with your responses to the case study. They were really thorough and well thought out. Most of you agreed with Reese's approach, right? So to review, Reese's had a situation where they had planned a campaign to release a new product for the Reese's Cup Fusion campaign, right? And the campaign was essentially leaked early, which presents a pretty big challenge from the perspective of public relations, because the idea is that with a campaign, you want to generate excitement. You want people to interact with your campaign when you're ready for that. And releasing that information early when you're not ready for it can be problematic, because obviously your materials aren't ready to go. Perhaps your product isn't ready to go, as many of you pointed out. And it can be something that dampens the excitement that is hopefully going to motivate people to interact with your campaign and hopefully ultimately lead to sales and buying your product. So from the perspective of Reese's, they weren't ready to launch this, but they did a really innovative thing, I think, and most of you agreed, in launching the campaign early on social media and really building into a couple of summer holidays, Mother's Day and Cinco de Mayo, with that early launch of the Cup Fusion campaign. As some of you pointed out, some possible strategies could have been to ignore the leak, right? You could have, in theory, you could have ignored that there was this leak out there and gone with your original plan. However, the drawback of that would have been obviously that perhaps the word would have gotten out, the excitement would have been dampened, people might have been a little bit angry with Reese's for not addressing the situation. You alternately could have launched early, but the drawback of that obviously is you're not quite ready, right? The product might not be ready. And so I think that Reese's really had a nice middle ground in how they handled it and kind of still playing with the suspense of the campaign, but really just sort of moving forward very quickly using social media, using the platform in which the campaign actually leaked, right, to then launch it. People were already talking about it, and so they played off of that buzz. And what I really like about this, and that some of you pointed out with your responses, was that number one, Reese's did a good job of pivoting, right? One of you wrote that they did a good job of kind of going along with what happens when things don't go as planned. In public relations and the discipline of public relations, yes, we always want to do as much planning on the front end as possible. But as you know, especially in this really social media based world, communication can happen very fast, and word can get out very quickly. And therefore, sometimes we lose control of the narrative that we want to promote with our client or our product or whatever we are representing from a public relations standpoint. And so what we're trying to do as public relations practitioners is get our message out in the most effective way possible, that's going to promote the product or client as much as possible in a positive way, right? And so the thing is, in a world where we have 24-hour news cycles and constant communication, we have to be able to pivot very quickly. And Reese's did a really good job of pivoting. If you talk to anyone who's ever worked for an advertising or public relations agency or in any kind of capacity from a communication standpoint, you have to learn to adapt very quickly. Things do not always go as planned. The other thing I really liked about this approach was, as someone pointed out, it really fit with the carefree image of the Reese's brand. Someone pointed out that only probably a candy could have gotten away with this sort of carefree approach, and I tend to agree with that. And the other thing that I liked about this was that they framed what would otherwise be considered a challenge as a real opportunity. And keep in mind, in the practice of public relations, right, we are constantly trying to frame things that could be considered otherwise as negatives as positives and opportunities. Usually there's a way to turn that unexpected thing around and hopefully turn it into an opportunity for your entity. And they did a really good job of that here. Also drawing in that concept of framing theory, right? The idea of how we present certain facts in a certain light to promote a certain image, right? Here they really turned that leak into something positive. They didn't get mad, they didn't stomp their feet, they didn't try to stop the leak, and they really embraced it. And in doing so, they framed those facts in that situation in a positive light for their brand. And so I think this was a really unique, good case study to start off with, because it does fit in with some key ideas of the fundamental practices of public relations, the idea of creating publicity. It fits in with some of the things we'll talk about here in a couple weeks, dealing with social media specifically, and also in loosely with that idea of framing theory, which you guys would have read about a little bit this week. Okay, so with that in mind, the last thing I wanted to do is just to bring up to you guys that I will be trying to post updates, either videos or textually, to the news section by late on Tuesday afternoons or evenings. That's going to be my goal, is to when I will update that news section either in text or hopefully in a video if time allows. So be looking for those. That's where I'll kind of address the conversations of the week. If you have any other questions though, please feel free to contact me. You have my cell phone number, you have my email address, and I do want to hear from you. Hopefully you have all of the tools to on D2L to help you progress through the semester between the PowerPoints, the readings, and the other assignments. But if you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I look forward to hearing what you have to say about case study 2 and engaging with you as we move into week 2 this week. So have a wonderful week and take care.